Coming up today, North Korea lobs 2 more ballistic missiles into the East Sea in apparent protest to the upcoming deployment of the THAAD missile defense system to South Korea. As pending bills start to stack up, South Korea's 3 main political parties agree to work together after a shaky start to the 20th National Assembly. Plus, Samsung Electronics unveils its latest big-screen smartphone, the Galaxy Note 7. It boasts a clearer display, state-of-the-art security features and waterproofing. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello, it's noon on Wednesday, the 3rd of August. You're tuned in to our midday newscast here on Arirang TV. Thank you ever so much for joining us today. I'm Mark Broom. Our top story this afternoon, North Korea has fired 2 ballistic missiles into the East Sea. This latest launch comes a matter of weeks after the regime lobbed 3 missiles, 2 Nodong class and 1 Scud, into the same general area. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff announced earlier today that North Korea fired 1 ballistic missile from Hwanghae-namdo province in the southwestern part of the country into the East Sea. Now, the launch time was 7:50 a.m. South Korea time, but the U.S. Strategic Command said North Korea had fired off 2 missiles, but that one of them exploded soon after the launch. Now, South Korean military sources say that both missiles are presumed to be Nodong missiles and that one of them flew around 1,000 kilometers. Now, they're still looking into the matter. Now, South Korea's defense ministry is on high alert for more missile launches, as the regime has a track record of firing a series of missiles on the same day. Now, this latest launch is being seen as an armed protest against the upcoming deployment to South Korea of the U.S. missile defense system THAAD. Now, many experts believe North Korea will continue to launch ballistic missiles this month, as a large-scale South Korea-U.S. war game called Ulchi Freedom Guardian is scheduled for the middle of the month. Now, since Kim Jong-un took power in late 2011, North Korea has launched over 32 ballistic missiles, including submarine-launched and mid-range Musan missiles. Well, that's all I have for now. I'll bring more updates in the later newscast. Back to you.
Yes, that was our Kim Hyun-bin reporting live from Seoul's Defense Ministry on North Korea's latest provocation, 2 ballistic missile firings into the East Sea. We'll have more on that story throughout the day, of course, here on Arirang News. Now, in the rest of the day's news, the 20th National Assembly started with grand hopes for cooperation, but that spirit of togetherness seems to have melted away somewhat. In a meeting this morning, though, the leaders of the 3 main opposition parties, Woo Sang-ho for the Minju Party, People's Party leader Park Ji-won and Justice Party leader No Hae-chan vowed to unite and work toward a common political agenda after voicing criticism of the current administration's unilateral governing style. They pledged to reform the prosecution and hold more parliamentary discussions on the government's proposed budget supplement and issues related to the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system. They also hope to hold a hearing on the government's use of water cannons at a demonstration last November, which knocked down a farmer who is still in a coma. Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics has unveiled the Galaxy Note 7 in New York. Featuring iris scanners for easy and secure logins, Samsung hopes the device will maintain the company's momentum in premium smartphone sales. It hits shelves around the world later this month. Park Jung-hong has more.
Samsung believes its latest smart device will set a new bar in the ever-competitive industry. In New York Tuesday, Samsung Electronics unveiled its Galaxy Note 7 phablet, which is short for phone plus tablet. The head of Samsung's mobile division says the Note 7 is the market's most intelligent smartphone.
Privacy and security is a growing concern. So, we are introducing iris scanning to protect your information.
Samsung says iris scanning allows the user to unlock their phone and even engage in mobile banking without the hassle of user verification just by looking into their phone for 1 second.
Iris scanner as a future thing in the movies, but now you can do it, and I think that it's amazing.
And the fingerprint now, I use it all the time, but the enhanced security is always great to have.
A couple of other key features are a foreign language translating function and enhanced water resistance. Users will be able to use the Note 7 underwater for up to half an hour, and the stylus, which has become synonymous with the Galaxy Note series, is also water resistant and dust resistant as well. The launch of the Note 7 comes ahead of the latest iPhone launch expected in autumn, and just days after Samsung Electronics posted its biggest quarterly profits in more than 2 years, retaining its title as the world's largest phone maker. Park Jong-hong, Arirang News.
And more good news for Samsung Electronics and also LG Electronics, because their market share, their combined market share of the North American smartphone market hit a record high of 49% in the second quarter of this year, according to market researcher Strategy Analytics. Samsung ranked first with a market share of 32.7%, up 5 percentage points on quarter. Apple's share fell to 24.5%, sharply down from more than 32% in the previous quarter. It's the first time in 2 years that Samsung overtook Apple's top spot in quarterly smartphone sales in North America. LG Electronics came in third with more than 16%. Korea's foreign exchange reserves rose by nearly $1.5 billion on month in July after shrinking for 2 months in a row. According to the Bank of Korea, the country's reserves came to $371.38 billion in July. That is up $1.49 billion from the previous month. The central bank attributed the rise to increased gains from investment in foreign assets, foreign reserves held in overseas securities. Well, they added $1.35 billion from the previous month, while overseas deposits gained $140 million over the cited period. As of the end of June, South Korea was the world's 7th largest holder of foreign exchange reserves. Now, staying with economic news, and Korea's key industries are not expected to do so well in the second half due to low oil prices and a slowdown in the global economy. The lingering threats have prompted some analysts to call for the swift passage of a multi-billion-dollar budget supplement. Kim Min-ji with the details.
Korea's core industries are expected to lose steam in the second half of this year. According to the Korea Development Bank, the prospects for most industries are gloomy, with the majority expected to post negative growth. The sectors most vulnerable are those subject to the government's corporate restructuring drive, namely the shipbuilding and shipping industries. Amid an industry-wide slump, the volume of orders for the shipbuilding sector is expected to plunge 92% this year from a year ago. As a result, the order backlog is expected to fall over 33%, while ship exports are projected to dip nearly 17%. The outlook for the construction industry isn't much better, especially because the number of overseas orders has dropped in the wake of the prolonged slump in global oil prices. The display sector could also be facing an uphill battle as companies step up their overseas production, pushing panel prices down. On the other hand, the semiconductor and mobile phone sectors both got a fair rating on the back of scheduled releases of new tech products. As for the potential risks in the second half, analysts point to low oil prices, which show no signs of picking up. Korea's benchmark Dubai crude has been hovering at around the $40 level since the spring. While that's good news for some industries, it hurts the economies of oil-exporting nations, which in turn takes a toll on Korea's exports to those countries, in addition to putting a dent in demand for offshore plants and ships, acting as a drag on the entire economy. On top of that, a possible rate hike in the U.S. could also trigger a massive capital outflow from the Korean market. Analysts say that for Korea to better weather the risks, there needs to be a swift implementation of the government's proposed $10 billion budget supplement, which is currently pending at the National Assembly. It's aimed at softening the impact of the corporate restructuring drive and boosting job creation, but analysts say a delay could muffle the desired effects. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Now, Bank of Korea board members will be putting their heads together this time next week. They have to decide whether or not to cut the key interest rate. Some say a further reduction to a new record low could reinvigorate an economy undergoing structural reforms and suffering from sagging exports. Our Hwang Ji-ae sat down with a member of the BOK's Monetary Policy Committee to see which direction the central bank might take.
So while releasing its new growth outlook, the government forecast Korea's exports to drop by around 5% from last year when we saw an 8% drop. Is Korea losing its industrial competitiveness, or is the downturn simply reflecting the slowing demand in China or other key markets?
Let's get the facts straight first. Even though we have seen a sharp drop in our exports, in volume terms, the first quarter of this year compared to the first quarter of last year actually increased in volume terms. The global economy is bleak. There's no doubt about it. And we most likely will be experiencing slow economic growth for the next 5-10 years. Within this slowdown, our export performance is not as bad as some people might have thought, largely because our export is so much dependent on the unit value prices, which in turn is very dependent on oil prices. I'm not saying that we were super, but given the circumstances that we have been heavily dependent on heavy industries, where competition has been most severe from China, from that context, we're doing okay. But the key challenge is, okay, how do we ensure, given the uncertainty in the external sector, that we strengthen the self-sustaining consumption cycle that we seems to have already put in place?
Exactly. To overcome that kind of challenge, do you think additional fiscal and monetary policies are necessary on top of the ones that the central bank and the government have introduced in June?
We recently had a conference, BOK and Peterson Institute, and many speakers there sort of emphasize the fact that we are facing structural problems. However, in all situations, it's not purely structural. There are some cyclical factors as well. And therefore, they emphasized the need for macroeconomic policies to be supportive of the undergoing structural reforms. Yet again, they also emphasize that macroeconomic policies are not substitute for structural reforms, but complementary to structural reforms. And that's exactly what we are aiming at. Despite the need for strong structural reforms, if the cyclicality strengthens too much and drags down the economy, then the global economy may actually fall into recession. So that we need to avoid.
The country, at the same time, faces longer-term issues like aging population that is a serious danger to the country's growth potential. What should the country do to raise its growth potential?
One is rebalancing. We have been an export-dependent economy, and that has to change at some point. And the second one is to create an economy, and that's essentially creating value that needs to solicit demand as well as supply. It's rather a little bit difficult concept, but what that essentially means in simple language is that we need to come up with products that did not exist before. And that's the way you create both supply and demand at the same time, because that then will have direct impact on job creation and recreate the virtuous cycle.
All right, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Well, that was our Hwang Ji-ae asking the questions there. Now, over in the United States, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has again bashed America's free trade agreement with South Korea. Speaking to his supporters in Columbus, Ohio on Tuesday local time, Trump labeled the FTA a, quote, job-killing deal, end quote. Ohio, a state in the so-called Rust Belt, has suffered a steep decline in manufacturing in recent years, a slump many blame on free trade deals taking factories overseas and causing an influx of cheap imports. And Trump didn't miss the chance to blame his Democratic rival Hillary Clinton for pushing such deals. He said they'd taken jobs away from Americans, causing huge economic loss to the U.S. economy. Trump has also blamed job losses on other foreign trade pacts, including NAFTA, as well as the Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP, which he has vowed to pull out of if elected president. International oil prices fell more than 1% on Tuesday, erasing early gains. The retreat came as persistent worries of a supply glut offset the impact of a weak dollar that initially propped up the market. On the New York Mercantile Exchange, West Texas Intermediate for September delivery closed trading at $39.51 a barrel, down 1.4%. It's the first time in 4 months that WTI has slipped below the $40 level. Initially, oil prices rose sharply, backed by the dollar hitting a 6-week low, but worries over oversupply eventually took over, bringing the prices back down. Now, just a day before, media reported that OPEC output last month was at an all-time high. Iraq, Nigeria and Saudi Arabia were seen to have increased production. Well, those are stories we've been following on this Wednesday afternoon here in Seoul. Our next newscast is coming up at 3 p.m. Korea time. Have a great day. Goodbye.